Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy.
So before we even get started, I'm curious, and I think we've brought it up before. Can't recall if it's been on the podcast or not because my brain
Because you
hole
got a
don't.
leaky brain
Yeah,
hole, a
yeah.
colander for a brain.
Some days, yes. But do you feel like IQ should play a factor in punishments and such? And if so, what's your threshold for how much they should be held accountable for the people who measure on the lower end?
So if they know right from wrong,
Yeah, but so can a child. So what's your threshold of, and not, I know you haven't answered that question yet first of my first question, but then my other question would be if the IQ test or whatever happened before any said crimes, do you think that holds more weight than the whole they're trying to pull the he's a dumbass after the fact?
oh, for sure. I think an IQ test after they've committed the crime is wildly inaccurate because let's just say they're smarter than they're pretending to be. I think after they've committed the crime, there shouldn't even be an IQ test. Take what you got from their schooling and whatever else and figure it out from there. Do they have a history?
Your theory, though, or your thoughts, rather, I'm just curious of where your standpoint is before I do my case of just if somebody is on the, like, right at the threshold of whether they're considered mentally disabled, they're right in that line of at what point do you feel is okay for punishing them like somebody who is functioning at a regular or normal their age group wise?
How old is the person?
An adult.
Like how adult? Are we talking 20s? Are we talking 30s, 40s, 50s? How much into adulting have they gotten? Because my question for that is, do they have a history of constantly getting in trouble because they can't seem to differentiate between right and wrong? Does that seem to be a pattern that they struggle with? Or are they, for the most part, a law abiding citizen and then do something stupid and don't seem to understand the ramifications of their actions? So, how adult are
Well, now we're getting into specifics.
No, I'm asking the age.
But before we get to a specific individual and isolated case, I just want to see what your opinion is before you hear anything about what we're going to talk about today of what you feel is fair. And if you are mentally handicapped, do you feel like you should be punished the same as somebody who has all their bearings?
First of all, why did it become me being mentally handicapped?
I didn't say you, what your thoughts
sure did.
are. Fine.
You sure did.
That's because it's a Freudian slip and you're mentally handicapped. Because you can't answer a basic gosh darn question of...
Because you're trying to do what I think should not be done, which is classify everyone together. And what I'm saying is, let's say you've got somebody that you said they're an adult, let's say they're 18, but through their entire teen years, they seem to struggle with what the difference between right and wrong is, or what the consequences to their actions are going to be. Then, yeah, I think if they commit a serious crime, that should be weighted when it comes to their sentencing, because they have a history of struggling to understand the seriousness of their actions. However, if they seem to have gotten it and they seem to have an understanding of things, then commit a crime and try to use that as a scapegoat, then no, I think the book should be thrown at them. I think everybody's going to be different. I think every case should be handled differently.
But at the same time, a young child can distinguish the right and wrong. There's just not necessarily the gravity of the consequences for said wrong thing. And that's what I guess my question is, if they get what they did was wrong, but not necessarily that level.
Right. I know you don't want to talk specifics, but there's that little boy. I was going to do that case a while back. It just came out, I think, a year or two ago. He was 10 years old. His mom told him no, he couldn't have, like, I don't know. I could be wrong on the details, but I think it was like a video game or a gaming system. She told him he couldn't have it. So he shot and killed her. He was 10. Now, I know he knows that what he did was wrong, but I don't think at 10 he understood that
it's not a video game. He can't reset.
Right. This is a finished finale. Like she is gone. your actions caused this,
Yeah.
I think he has a chance to be rehabilitated. I think that's a lack of understanding reality. Not saying he's mentally handicapped, but saying like that's using the whole comparison of a
So you
child.
kind of do think that it plays a factor in sentencing and punishment.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. Well, today...
But only if there's a clear history of they already seem to not be able to wrap their head around it.
Well, today I'm just going to tell you a story. A story about a boy, but not just any boy. This particular boy would be Michael Angelo Coleman.
Is he related to Gary Coleman?
I'm going to ignore that. Anyway, so Michael was born November 11th, 1957 in Tennessee to Alkie Burroughs and Shirley Coleman. Now, Michael's dad would spend the majority of Michael's childhood in jail, and when he wasn't serving time in jail, he didn't seem to care about being involved in his son's life. Now, Michael's mom was intellectually disabled, had a history of mental illness, was an alcoholic, and a chronic drug abuser. Not only did his mom drink during his childhood, but she also drank throughout her pregnancy with Michael.
I have a question. How mentally handicapped was she? Because how was she able to get married? Not saying that mentally handicapped people shouldn't be allowed to
She wasn't married.
So he just got her knocked up?
That's why I told you his pa was Alkie Burroughs and she's Shirley Coleman.
All right. Sounds like he took advantage of her.
Well, he might have.
She didn't have anybody looking out for her? Like, how handicapped was she?
So you can be intellectually disabled and not be a drooler, unable to do things. You can just
I
be
understand.
struggling with your basics. You don't have to have somebody...
She didn't have family.
Look, Andrea, they were only so far into the case and you already got too many questions.
Look, if you were mentally disabled in any way, shape, or form...
I appreciate the if. That you'd look out for me. I thank you.
I would definitely try to get you as much assistance if you started dabbling in drugs and alcohol, because that's not going to help with your brain hole. I ain't wearing pantyhose.
So clearly, if this is going to be, she's got a history of mental illness, maybe she inherited it, and maybe all of her family is also intellectually disabled, and maybe she's the shining star of that family. You don't know.
Sad.
And I didn't go back that many generations, ma'am. I'm just telling you that not only did she drink during his childhood, but she also drank during her pregnancy with Michael, right? Now, if that wasn't enough, when she found out she was pregnant, she would try to get rid of her pregnancy by jumping off the roof of a shed.
Sorry.
So if you're wondering how mentally unstable, I would say that doesn't seem like a wildly good idea.
No, and it sounds like he possibly got him a head injury in utero.
Now, she was so wildly unhinged that she would need to be anesthetized for the birth of her son, Michael, and they would have to pull him from his mother's body with forceps, which I feel like is
There's head injury number 2.
So I feel like it was to mention that this is a head injury when they pinch too hard to get him out, which if you were curious...
That's disgusting, Claire.
Well, if you were curious if that's a possibility when they whip these things out, anywhere from mild bruising to severe permanent brain and spinal damage is possible. Although rare as that damage may be, it's still possible. Now, mind you, if you can find a life-saving tool to save mom and or baby, well, I mean, a skilled user of forceps, but that just happens to be a tool in the hands of skilled medical providers. However, they could still be whoever did that did do some smushing on top of if she, fetal alcohol syndrome being thrown in here of if she was drinking and jumping off a shed. I don't think it's stone's throw chance of something could have gone wrong. But anyway.
You've got also the genetics play a factor.
Yeah.
So.
But I'm just saying this tool, there is that possibility also to cause that damage. It's known, which is why many hospitals ban them from being used in the United States. In Europe, they do still use them, but they're limited to certain skilled medical professionals. It seems like an awful idea, but I can't even imagine. That just seems so horrible. I mean, not as bad as the whole pelvic chainsaw thing, especially it being a hand crank.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there because he's got a lot of things
working against
before
him.
He's even really born.
Yeah.
Working against him. So if I painted the picture of Michael was born into a far from a happy home, I hope that's what you gotten thus far. He would be brought into a chaotic, overcrowded, and unclean environment in one of the most dangerous areas of Memphis. If I haven't told you we're in Tennessee, there's your sign. Okay, so Michael's existence didn't seem to matter to either one of his parents. So not that they lived together, but his mom didn't seem to really care, so he frequently went without food or even medical attention if he needed it.
But she tried to throw herself off a roof when she found out she was pregnant with him. So I don't think anyone should be surprised that she's not like over the moon excited.
Yeah. Now, the neglect was partially due to his mother not being home, but when she was home, she would be abusive, which I would imagine would make Michael not really miss her being home because he's not getting smacked and she's not being drunk all fucking slappy. So any guesses of what she did for work?
Prostitute!
You guessed it right!
Ding, ding, ding! We have a winner!
And sometimes she would bring her work home with her and service her customers with her son not far.
Don't pause like that.
Now, can we just take a moment to reflect on the number of times we've discussed parents just prostituting or paying for sex with their kid in the same room?
I don't want to reflect on that. I try to block that out.
And I also want to focus on what the fuck is with people and I need to go get a job. You know what? Prostitution. What? I can tell you it's never been even on a list of consideration for gainful employment ever.
Is it because you ain't good at it?
I'm okay with not being good at prostituting, so it's not a skill set I'm going to try out, so I'll just, we can jot that down. Claire, not good at being a prostitute.
So you've tried it?
No, I just literally said I'm good with not having that as a skill set. Not even to try, Andrea. Unlike you, it's not a currency I use. Paying with pussy.
Excuse me. I never and would never.
All right.
I was just testing to see what your skill set really was. You bring up the prostitutes a lot, ma'am. It's awfully concerning.
Seriously, it's concerning to me. Am I just blind to all the prostitution that's going on?
No. Apparently I was too.
I mean, you didn't even think prostitution was still happening, so... but I didn't realize it was happening so often that it's like, what the hell? No wonder we need more work, the work environment's so poor. Everybody's turned to prostitution. We have nobody to run the stores.
Everybody's hands are busy.
Ew. Although I think it's funny, you thought prostitution was exclusively at night.
I did not.
I did that one case where it was daylight hours and she was just finding all sorts of fellers before the sun went down. And you said you didn't know it was real busy.
I just found it shocking that there was that many men out looking for prostitutes.
In the morning?
No, maybe just in general.
You know what? Hindsight, it would make total sense to be looking for a prostitute in the morning because by the evening hours, she's used up.
Unless you're catching her in the wee hours of the morning, in which case she is definitely lubed.
Or crusty, you don't know. Anyway, back to Michael. Michael would fail the first grade, the second grade, the third grade, and the seventh grade. Now, don't ask me what happened during fourth, fifth, and sixth because they specifically said he failed first, second, third, and seventh. So I was like, what?
So that tells me that he has some sort of learning disability, and those teachers did not even try.
Hold your pantyhose. So
again, I ain't wearing pantyhose.
You got to keep in mind he was born at the end of the 50s. So the discovery of learning disabilities and even mentally handicapped or just like people treading the line, they didn't really know enough about it. So this is the generation of they don't know how to deal with it. So we don't talk about it.
Right.
So basically he would advance to the next grade as more of a social promotion rather than because he had mastered the knowledge in that grade in order to move on. So Michael, since there's neglect in his household, would often be absent, which also made learning and keeping up with his classmates next to impossible. He'd go to school in dirty clothes, sometimes the same clothes he wore the day before, and was generally messy in appearance that would eventually lead to students noticing and picking on him, which would single Michael out, and he would end up being lonely at home and at school.
Poor baby.
And what do we see happens when a child isn't nurtured anywhere or cared about? Naturally, Michael eventually grows hateful and angry. He turns violent and would start fighting with other kids at school who are picking on him and even become belligerent with his teachers. He would go as far as to try to set the school on fire, and when that didn't work, He tried to set himself on fire at his desk.
Oh my gosh.
Now, bear in mind, this is an elementary school.
Okay, well, at this point in time, shame on all the adults in his life because somebody should have helped this little boy.
That's why I said reading, again, before he was even born, what do you expect out of this poor little thing?
Yeah.
And when it's just like, there's absolutely no one in his little world that just
Is looking out for him.
Right. That what do you expect to happen to this poor little baby? I mean, obviously you can see the path. It's just like, and kids can be mean. They don't see what they're doing. They're just making fun of him and he can't help it. He goes home, he gets smacked. He goes to school, he's made fun of. Yeah, I can see where that would make you hateful.
Poor baby.
But now, mind you, when he starts the whole fire things, this behavior would get attention and he would be recommended to a psychologist at just 10 years old. Now, there he would be evaluated as having visual perceptional problems and his cognitive function was described as dull. The evaluator would make several social and academic recommendations, but recommendations that if those didn't work, that he should be provided with special education materials. Now, his 5th grade teacher would say that Michael tried to keep up the best that he could. He was just slow. He couldn't read well. I also feel like he didn't have a home environment to have anybody to help him.
Yeah.
And there wasn't there wasn't anybody to help him thrive. So he was stuck in the classroom because they don't have a special area for special needs or anything. So he would end up spacing out and getting distracted. My guess would be he started to lose focus anyway because he doesn't know the materials. He's been pushed forward. He doesn't know what they're even talking about. So yeah, he's going to act out. He's going to space out. He doesn't know what they're doing.
This poor boy. I feel sorry for him.
I know. Not like I said, at this point, there is no special education program or really any very developed plans to help with kids like Michael at this point. Now, because of the lack of those options, they would keep him in his regular classroom to avoid labeling him as special needs. And a lot of good that did. Now, by the summer of 1971, he's 12 going on 13. When he would hit November, he'd be 13. He would begin having his run-ins with the law. One officer who detained him for a curfew violation thought, and I'm just quoting, that he's retarded.
Oh.
That officer would say that Michael was so slow, and because of that, he questioned whether the normal protocol would be detaining him for 36 hours as a punishment to teach him a lesson to be home before whatever the curfew time was, that he's a youngin', he doesn't need to be out late at night. But that was considered, the punishment was to be detained for 36 hours. But this officer didn't feel like that would be effective because he felt that he was so slow that it wouldn't be an effective punishment on him. So he releases Michael rather than taking him to juvie. Now, the very next summer, he's arrested, and this time they do send him to juvie. There, Dr. Frank Lee would give him psychological evaluations and diagnose him as being borderline mentally retarded. He would note that Michael was lacking in educational knowledge, but also environmental awareness. He struggled with comprehending and assessing situations, resulting in him having inappropriate responses to whatever situation he was in. Naturally, this would make Michael a very frustrated and easily agitated youngin' who would be likely to act out his feelings. Now, mind you, that's him going into his teens, and I don't feel like the throes of puberty is something to add to the confusion, frustration. You have a difficulty processing all of that. Now, based on Dr. Lee's recommendation, Michael was then placed in the Tennessee Development Center and is where he stayed until October 1973 when he was moved to the Taft Youth Center, where he was placed in the 7th grade program, even though he's now 16 years old at this point, and they said he's functioning at a 5th grade level in math, but his reading and comprehension was a 4th grade level, and his spelling a 3rd grade level. So I don't know why they made the decision to put him there, other than he's probably just age-wise, they can't keep him in 3rd grade.
Yeah.
Now, he would continue to struggle and function at that 5th grade level, so they would decide that they've taken him as far as they can. Let's send you back to public school, but let's put you in the 7th grade.
Why would they do that?
I don't know. And guess what? he would get D's and F's in this class. Surprise, surprise.
And I'm sure he also got bullied.
Yeah. And that's where I say, like, because he was on that threshold of he's not handicapped enough for him to be full-fledged stay there, but he's also not functioning high enough to go into regular programs. So that's where, what do you do with that?
He was a victim of a lack of knowledge with the education system.
Yeah. So that's where it feels like he gets ping-ponged a lot of it, but because they don't really know what to do with him. But they're failing him because why would you throw him in 7th grade? I get they're factoring in his age, but it feels like people did the whole, well, he doesn't technically need to be here. He's operating too high for who he's around over here, but too low over there. There is no place for him, so let's just put him over there. When they switch him back to public school, he wouldn't have an interest in sports, hobbies, or really anything outside of school.
Can you blame him?
I know that he's just getting dumped off. Now, it wasn't long before his lonely walks turned into abusing drugs, just like his mom. Then come the repeated arrests for things like loitering, disorderly conduct, breaking a drugstore window, entering unlocked houses, stealing a car, smoking pot, drinking beer, and even more illegal drug use. Now, this escalation would eventually lead to him being convicted of robbery and receiving a 3-year sentence at Fort Pello Prison and Farm. And I'm just going to tell you, I laughed at that. Who names a prison Fort Pello?
I feel bad for this kid, but because it's called Fort Pillow, I hope it's one of those like barbed wire, looks real scary, lots of bars, lots of metal, just, you know.
Yeah, well, it didn't sound scary to me. It sounded like a place you go to take a nap and have a snack because it's Fort Pillow Prison and Farm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I am sad to say it wasn't a place to go for a nap or a snack. Michael, being all slow and physically smaller, would find himself an easy victim and end up being used by sexual predators in an area of the prison that they had nicknamed the Car Wash.
Ew.
Which was a place where the weaker prisoners were brought and subjected to gang rapes. He endured 3 years of that. Now, his last 4 months of his sentence, he requested to be confined because of the sexual threats against him. And I'm not sure exactly how he requested that, but I feel like a guard felt sorry for him and told him he could request to be by himself. And then he probably did that. Yeah, let's do that to keep the men away. But
Poor baby.
I think it's disgusting. Now, when he's released from Fort Pello, Michael would move in with a friend he had made while he was at the Taft Youth Center, Anthony Braxton, and his family, which I was glad that he made a friend, because it's like the first friend ever, right? And then the fact that his family was willing to take him in when, let's just say, or face it, that the Taft Youth Center, not the best collection. So you're generally taking on an extra set of special needs and special circumstances. So I was like, oh, yay, shining light.
Is it an actual friend, or is this somebody that he's going to get into lots of trouble with?
I'm telling you a story. Don't get ahead of it. So,
well, I'm not saying yay and celebrating with you if the friend is not really a friend.
You can celebrate now because it's the first shining light of hope that he has somebody that he likes and who likes him back. And it's like the first person in his life that he has. His name is Anthony Braxton, and he would live with him and his family from September 1977 to February 1978.
I'm going to just say it now. They're going to be in trouble together.
Now, weirdly, the two boys had looked so much alike that they could either pass for relatives or nearly twins. And then, as it turned out, that they were related. Anthony was Michael's half-brother, and they were born roughly 3 months apart. Bear in mind, his mom was a prostitute. So apparently, different ma, same pa. They would develop a close bond. Anthony was also intellectually disabled and functioning at the level of an 8-year-old.
So I'm going to say their paw has some super bad sperm.
It must be. And I feel like this was, again, the first time that Michael would experience a happy, exciting moment ever in his life. And it would seem like he was where he needed to be in order to thrive. And I'm sure Anthony's parents were thrilled too.
Was he adopted into the family he's currently with?
Yes.
Or does he live? Okay. So this adopted family just somehow ended up with their adopted son's half-brother
Troubled
also?
child. So I thought it was crazy odds that they ended up meeting at a little Taft Youth Center. I just thought that was, the odds are crazy, assuming that they don't have 500 half siblings out there. Like, turns out the Taft Youth Center is full of all their half siblings.
Turns out their ma and their pa could have definitely been continuously cranking them out.
Right. But I thought it was pretty crazy that not even knowing that that's a half sibling, that they took them in and to find out that they are half siblings. Anyway, so that'll bring us to February 1978. You figure they got a close bond. They're besties. Anthony would be murdered.
What the heck?
It would be 1 a.m. in the morning when 19-year-old Alan McDowell would walk up to Anthony and shoot him twice. Anthony fell face down in the street. He tried to crawl to the curb when witnesses watched in horror as Alan stood over Anthony and shot him 3 more times.
How old was Anthony?
78.
Oh no, you're doing the math.
18, 19.
Did Michael see all that?
No, I don't think so. I don't know what Anthony was doing out in the street, but
nothing good.
No.
That time.
Now, naturally, the news of Anthony being murdered would send Michael into a tailspin of deterioration. So much so that he would start calling himself Anthony, which I thought was particularly sad because here you've got somebody with mental health issues and difficulty processing environmental things. And he also looks almost like the person who was his favorite person, and as limited time as they had together just ripped right out from him.
I'm really sad for him.
Right. So 2 weeks after Anthony's death, Michael would be checked into a mental hospital because he was hallucinating. Here, he is diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and given antipsychotic medications.
Is it at all possible that somebody thought he was hallucinating because he was talking to his dead brother?
Yeah.
Or calling himself that, and they just medicated him because they didn't know what else to do with him?
I also thought it was a possibility that with Anthony being dead, that not to say that the parents that had let Michael come into the house were just trying to dump him off, but I think he looked like their son that they had raised. Now he's gone. He's having mental issues, and they don't want to deal with all of that on top of him looking an awful lot like their son.
Yeah.
That they can't deal with his grief being so extreme that it's making it hard for them to move on. So I think that's also why they took him to get some help.
I guess at least they turned and tried to get him help versus just turning him out on the street.
Yeah. Now is when we bring on, he's back to drinking alcohol and on drugs at a far greater rate before his time at Fort Pillow. Now, his drug of choice was PCP, also known as angel dust. Now, naturally, the mixture of mental instability and substance abuse would light the fires of violent tendencies in Michael, which would fast forward us to May 2nd, 1979, barely 90 days after his half-brother's death. 69-year-old Leon Watson would leave his home that May morning to head to the grocery store. As the day wore on, Leon's wife would grow more and more concerned at her husband not returning from the grocery store. She would contact the police. It was on Leon's way to the grocery store that Michael Coleman and Michael Bell would rob Leon, and then Michael Coleman would shoot Leon to death. Now, the two Michaels then proceeded to go through his wallet and then his car, stealing a pistol and the radio from Leon's vehicle. The next day, the two Michaels are picked up on unrelated charges. While Michael Coleman was being read his rights, he tells officers that he found a body of a man near 3rd Street. Naturally, the officers are like, "What'd you just say?" I figure it's one of those times that an officer is like, "Do you know why you're here today?"
Yeah.
And because he's not complicated with his brain processing, he just throws that one out there as a guess. So Michael would tell them where the body was. They would find Leon and his empty wallet not far from his body, along with other items that had been thrown from his car, and then the car itself. Now, after Michael was read his rights again, he confesses that he's the one who shot and robbed Leon, and then goes on to say that his pal Michael Bell was there too, and that they took the CB radio that Leon had in his car, as well as the gun they found in there, and he said he had stashed it at his grandma's house. Naturally, both would be arrested. They do end up talking to Michael Bell, who's like, yeah, we robbed him. I didn't shoot him, though.
Can I just say that it's two Michaels committing the crimes, right?
I know it was confuse you. Michael Coleman is the one we started with, and I was like, God dang it.
But is the other Michael mentally challenged?
I don't think so. I think he's just a criminal who has a pal that
Commits crime?
yeah, that they were just robbing people together.
Well, he gets what he gets.
And I think it's easy to get people to go along. Now, naturally, both of them are arrested. Michael would try to hang himself after his arrest.
Which Michael?
Michael Coleman, the one we've been talking about.
Okay.
I'm going to call the other one just Bell. That way you can distinguish, because the Michaels all get confusing. But my guess would be Michael trying to hang himself would be he didn't want to go back to jail. He spent like 3 years getting fucked in the bathroom. He don't want to go back there.
Yeah, that's really sad.
But he would say he had a headache and he didn't know any other way to stop the pain in his head other than killing himself.
I feel like that was an idea that was suggested to him.
Yeah. So both men would go on trial for murder in the perpetration of a robbery in 1980. Now, since the murder was during a robbery and the jury found that there were aggravating circumstances as well as a history of prior convictions for Michael, they would throw the book at him. Now, mind you, he has 6 felony charges that were pending. 3 were assaults with intent to commit robbery. 1 was an assault with the intent to commit robbery with a deadly weapon, another for robbery with a deadly weapon, and then the last one for kidnapping. Now, one of his charges had occurred just 5 months before Leon was shot and killed. Michael was on the bus acting odd. According to another passenger, he would pee in front of everyone before shooting the bus driver and running off.
Oh.
So it's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, he was on a downward spiral.
Yeah, super bad. Like, he reached the cliff and dove right off. So now he'd also bring up during the trial his drugs, any infections he had in his life that were untreated, which I did do that seems reaching. But he'd bring up his mom drinking and smacking him and drinking while she was pregnant, and also the stressors he endured with the death of his half-brother. And I feel like since it was at trial, if you don't look at it in the order it came out, it does seem like you're just bringing this up to get away with something, but it's just like, if you don't know we're about to talk about him killing somebody, there's so much prior to his brother dying that was wronged to him. I don't see how you can't take it into consideration.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
And just so you know, when I was first reading it and that they brought up the stressors he endured with his half-brother, I at first misread and thought it said scissors. And I was like, I didn't see scissors in here at all.
Because you don't do the reading so well?
Clearly not. But they also bring up that his IQ was barely 70. Now, they would sentence Michael to death and Michael Bell to life in prison, since it was like the aggravated circumstances. But Michael would file over 16 appeals by the early 90s, insisting that the confession wasn't given freely or voluntarily and couldn't be used as evidence. And when those didn't work, he started filing for post-conviction petitions since he was borderline mentally retarded. But that it's unconstitutional to put somebody who's mentally disabled to death.
Did he get put to death?
He would eventually have the death penalty changed to life sentence and would be paroled in 1994.
Oh my gosh.
Where he continues to undergo supervision.
He went from the death penalty to freedom?
Dude, I did the same thing. I was like, whoa. I mean, I feel bad for the feller, but free?
I was just sitting here thinking, I don't know, if I was getting violently gang raped.
I'd want to be put to death.
Yeah, just put me out of misery. Can we fast forward this? I don't want any appeals. Let's just get it over and done with. But shit, he's out?
He was released in 1994. Now,
does he at least get his shit together, or does he turn around and end up...
So it does appear that he hasn't had additional scrapes with the law. Otherwise, he'd get tossed right back into the slammer. So let's hope that he continues on the path of getting the help he needs and the meds he needs. So I don't know if part of it is he needed to get off the drugs. He needed to get on the correct medications. And then it's also like, since your hormones are all over the place when you're growing up, all of that needed to level out. And let's just say that with him being behind developmentally, maybe that took longer for his hormones and all that to level out and get his meds right. But being in jail gave that as an opportunity. So he is supervised, but it's just like, I didn't expect it to be released.
No.
But that's why I was curious, because when I was reading the story, not to detract from what he did as it wasn't serious, but he was into a whole lot of stuff, and even not doing drugs, he had mental issues.
Yeah.
So it's just like, ugh. And then when you throw him in jail, the people in there that are wiser, or not wiser, but more intelligent, are using that to trick him into places to gang rape him. That's not right either.
No. I mean, that's awful.
Yeah, and then that's what I was like, well, I was curious where your position was on that one, because prior to reading his life, I feel like I would have been more along those lines of the jury of just like, yeah, I don't give a shit. You're going to bring up your IQ now. But they were aware of all that prior to. It just seems like he was so down the middle, they didn't have a place for him in that point of time. So he went overlooked consistently.
And he had nobody looking out for him.
No, and I can imagine when you read up until when he meets his half brother, and then it's just like when I was reading it, and then I read everything after his brother died went way crazy. Like prior to his brother, he was doing the normal delinquency nonsense of breaking windows, just doing mischievous things, but he wasn't hurting people.
You said it was just 90 days after his brother died, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like the Michael Bell feller should have also gotten the charge of taking advantage of somebody that was...
So in order for them to do that, they would have had to say that he had a handicapped. And in order to say he had a handicapped, then they'd have to do a reduced sentence. But since Michael Coleman was the one who pulled the trigger, is why they were gunning for severe punishment, because he's the one who killed Leon.
Right. Yeah.
But that's what I got for that one. Now, Michael Bell is dead.
How'd he die?
Natural causes.
You're lying.
He's dead. He
just died in prison? When did he die?
I knew you'd ask me all these fucking stupid questions. It's not about him. It was about Michael Coleman. I'm just telling you.
It really is about him, though, because I feel like if it weren't for this feller, if it weren't for Michael 2 meeting Michael number 1, that they wouldn't have ended up... I don't necessarily believe he was on the track to go kill people.
So I think it was less of it wasn't first degree. It was just they were going to rob Leon, and Michael didn't have a whole lot of reason to live before, but he did. He kind of had a purpose to his life a little bit when he found his brother, and they both could share in that they were kind of on the same...
Had a piece of shit dad.
That, and on the same wavelength of mental capacity, so they were real buddy pals. And then to find out your brother's is even more exciting. He's got family that actually cares about him now. So it's just like, and then to have that taken, I don't feel like he gave a shit. And that's why fucking, if shooting people randomly is what we do, that's what he did. Who put the
gun in his hand?
I don't know. I wasn't there, Andrea.
I'm going to say the Michael Bell feller did. Who put the gun in his hand? That's what I want to know. Where did he get the weapon?
Mm-hmm. Well, that was it anyway. I knew you were going to ask stupid questions.
They're not stupid just because you don't know the answers.
Well, I'm just saying is all. The jury didn't want to hear about his intellectual hiccups. But so the first trial, they would have people saying that he met the requirement in order to sentence him to death, whatever that threshold was to understand the things. And then you had some people or some doctors who were like, yeah, I don't agree with that. But then that's when the jury was just like, we'll go with this feller because he's believable. So then that's when they sentenced him to death. But then you fast forward a few years and our knowledge of mental handicaps becomes greater. So when they take another gander at it and they're like, yeah, let's not do that.
Well,
but I was just as surprised as you were with he's released.
Yeah, that one was shocking. And I think that it has a lot to do with the fact that not only did he have a history of mental issues, not really, I don't even want to say mental issues, but like he struggled with right and wrong. Yeah, I guess.
Really how to behave in situations. And I feel like jail probably was the best place for him to grieve that hard loss of his brother. because he was only going to continue to lash out, and he needed to do that in an environment that was more supervised and controlled, and he got his meds, that he could work through all the things.
Yeah.
I feel bad that I'm sure there's more people out there. Even now, just because we have the availability, there are kids that fall through the cracks. It's real sad.
It is. Poor feller. I mean, and not to lose sight of his victims, but
Yeah,
hey, did the bus driver die?
It didn't say the bus driver died. And I thought it was real weird that it was just like he peed on the bus and then shot the driver and then ran off. So I feel like it couldn't have been a dead bus driver, because I tried to find information on that one too, because I was like, what the fuck?
Maybe you just shot at the bus driver.
Yeah.
Which is why there's no details.
Yeah. But I felt bad because I was like, it's weird to sympathize with the murderer. But then Leon was just living his best life. He was just going to go to the store to grab his wife some things. And I feel bad for her too, because that was senseless.
It really was. I think Michael was grieving
and on drugs
and depressed and just didn't know how to process it. And he had no support system to speak of. So
yeah,
it's real hard.
That's what led me to my question of how you would feel if it was brought up at a trial kind of situation of like IQ and all that, because I do feel like that's where the jury, like, I feel like the first trial, it wasn't presented well enough to them. Because I don't know how you can hear all of that and not go, oh, well, fuck. He knew nobody until that half-brother.
But then again, he still murdered somebody.
Right. And not to say, and that's why I was saying, like, what is a fair punishment in that situation?
I mean, it's a tough call.
Right. I agree.
Because, like, was he apologetic afterwards? Like, did he have remorse?
You can ask him.
I'm good.
He might come to you. I don't know what he's doing.
We know of someone who has a IQ, they claim as an 8-year-old. You know who I'm talking about.
So I never met him.
Right, but we know of someone.
I can't say that because I never met him.
We, as in our family, knows of someone.
Fine. I just got cut out of the family.
Jesus Christ, Claire. I'm going to test your IQ at this point.
I am aware there are people out there with low IQs. Just because you know of someone doesn't mean I get to be thrown into it. You're aware of somebody with a low IQ.
Okay, fucker, if you shut up and let me finish a goddamn sentence. What I was trying to say is I know of someone who tests at supposedly at an 8-year-old's level. He understands the difference between right and wrong. And if I sit back and look at that person that I know, if he were to go and kill someone, I realize he's been through his own things in his life and he struggles with life in general, but I would still expect him to be
punished.
Yeah, to the full extent of the law. So while I think it sucks the things that he experienced to get him to that point,
it's not a free pass.
It really isn't. Yeah, he shouldn't be on death row. However, he does deserve to be behind bars.
Well, that's where I'm grappling with what a fair punishment is. Because when I was shocked at the whole this feller being released, I was also shocked because I was like, I don't know that that's right. Killing him didn't seem right.
Yeah.
But that's why I was curious of it's definitely something to consider. But I can tell you, I don't know what the right answer would be because there is no...
Now, I did stop listening at one point because I was just utterly shocked. Is he monitored for the rest of his life, or was there just like a probationary period?
No, it was supervision for life.
Okay. So at least they did that right.
Which I thought that was interesting that Tennessee has that as an option.
That's a real fucked up case, Claire.
I know. And I knew you weren't going to see it coming.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mind-fucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.